Hi, this is Men's Health TV. I'm Glenn Poole of the Australian Men's Health Forum, and you're watching Blokes Healthy Lunchbox. On today's program, we're talking about nutrition and men's health. This is one of several programs we're running throughout Men's Health Week, which continues right through till Sunday. Joining me today on the program, we have three fantastic speakers for you who are going to explore different aspects of nutrition and blokes' health. We've got Professor Gary Wittert, and he's from the Freemasons Foundation Centre for Men's Health. So he's a bloke who knows a lot about blokes' health. We've also got Joel Feren, and he's a specialist nutritionist, so he knows a lot about nutrition. And first, we've got Brendan O'Dowd from IncoLink, who do fantastic work going out into workplaces, and particularly the construction industry, and delivering health talks, health promotion, health services to blokes at work. And Brendan's going to be talking about the link between nutrition and your mental health. I'm going to hand over to Brendan now, who's going to be talking with you for the next 15 to 20 minutes. Brendan, thanks for being here. The floor's yours.
Thanks, Glenn. As Glenn mentioned at the start of today, I'm from IncoLink, a counsellor there. And for those in the audience who don't know what IncoLink is or does, IncoLink is a joint enterprise between employers and industry unions within the commercial, building, construction and civil industries in Victoria and Tasmania. And IncoLink's main role is in administering redundancy funds, along with a few other financial services such as income protection insurance schemes and portable sick leave. But along with these financial services to the construction industry, IncoLink provides some other services, such as training and education for the construction industry. And also we have a really strong wellbeing and support team, of which I'm a part. We have a group of a dozen or so counsellors at IncoLink who provide counselling services face to face. We also provide counselling services through this kind of medium, through a digital medium. And we're also really strong on education, and particularly education within mental health, and mental health particularly for workers in the construction industry. So we might go out and talk to people about how our mental health is impacted by being a construction worker, or what negative impacts or stresses affect us as construction workers. And we really like this model of talking about mental health as being on a spectrum, which means that our mental health is not fixed. It's constantly moving up or down, being impacted positively or negatively by both the things that are happening in our life and the way we react to them. If something affects us in a positive way and our mental health goes up, we talk about that as a protective factor. And if something impacts us negatively and has a negative impact on our mental health, we call that a stressor or a risk factor. Now, this is really interesting in the context of nutrition, because we would definitely consider nutrition and looking after how we eat and what we eat and how that impacts on our body as a protective factor. If we do that well, it's going to have a positive influence on our mental health. Now, I'm sure both Gary and Joel will be able to talk a little bit more later on in the program about the specific things that we can put into our bodies that are going to positively or negatively impact our body and our brain as food, as nutrients. But I'd like to talk about nutrition as a protective factor for our mental health, particularly as a tradie. I've been in the construction industry for 30 to 35 years, and I've seen a lot of tradies working in a lot of different construction environments. And even today, when I go out onto a job site to talk to our members, I'm really constantly amazed at the demands that are put on construction workers. What do I mean? Well, what does a construction worker's day look like? It looks sort of like this. A construction worker will generally be getting up at 4:30, quarter to 5 in the morning. If there's other people in their household, those other people will be asleep. It'll be dark, particularly this time of the year. He'll be getting himself ready for work and thinking about his travel to work. And he'll be getting to work at somewhere between 6:15 and 7 o'clock. Then he'll work for 10 to 12 hours. And then he'll get back in his car or whatever kind of transport he's taking, and he'll make his way back home again. And by the end of that day, he's been away from his home for maybe 14 hours. He's worked 10 to 12, and he's travelled up to an hour and a half or 2 hours each way to get to and from the job. He does that 5 or 6 days a week, so that at the end of his week, the tradie has worked 65 or 70 hours, which is an enormous workload. On top of that, the tradie not only has worked that long, but he's worked pretty hard. I'm still amazed when I go out to site and see tradies lifting things, hauling things, pouring concrete, going up and down in alley mats, dealing with the noise, the chaos, the safety concerns. Tradie work is dangerous. And so not only is the tradesperson working these very long hours, but he's working really, really hard, and his body is working really hard. On top of that, in the trades and building industry, there is a culture of drinking and drug taking, which can further impact his ability to cope in the long term and to recover. So if I describe a tradie's day like that, in the context of nutrition, I guess it's fair to say that nutrition's probably an important part of a tradie being able to manage, to keep working, to over a long period of time be able to continue to cope with that large workload. Again, Gary and Joel might talk some more about the specifics of nutrition later on, but I think we can see the need for that. If we go back to the mental health spectrum and think for a moment about our mental health, at any given time, in any given day, in any given week, our mental health can be up here on the positive end, maybe in the middle, or perhaps it's down the negative end of the spectrum, depending upon what's going on and how we're coping with it. But at IncoLink, we like to talk a lot about making sure we have good routine and good protective factors, those things that impact our mental health in a positive way. So for instance, if I'm enjoying good relationships with family and friends, we'd consider that a protective factor that's going to impact positively on our mental health. if I have a good routine of exercise and physically looking after my body, that's going to impact positively on my mental health. If I eat well, that's going to impact positively on my mental health. If I reduce the amount of alcohol and drugs I take, that's going to impact positively on my mental health. And when you think about a tradie's day, and they're getting up early, and they're travelling to work in the dark, and their long hours, and their energy expenditure, and them being tired at the end of the day, it certainly creates an environment where a tradesperson can go, I can't be bothered looking after my nutritional well-being. It's easy at 4:30 or 5 o'clock or 5:30 in the morning to stop past a takeaway store and grab a coffee and something that may be less nutritional to eat. It's easy to run down to the bottom of the job site and grab takeaway food at lunchtime because it's quick and easy. I didn't pack my lunch. It's easy at the end of the day to come home tired and go, you know what, I can't be bothered going and buying some good groceries to create a lunch for myself tomorrow because I'm stuck. So there's plenty of reasons why tradies may not be looking after their nutritional aspects of their life well, but I'd encourage them to make the effort to do that. It's important. On the sidelines, I'm in my spare time, when I'm not a counsellor at Incolink, I spend some of my spare time as a boxing coach. And I have a lot of guys coming in and out of the boxing gym where I train, looking after their physical health. And we find that when guys have got a really good habit going with their physical exercise, with keeping fit, with trying to keep some kind of physical condition, they also then take their mind to how they feed their body, how they look after themselves, how they recover from their exercise. And so I bring up this point because I think these two things go hand in hand, particularly for the men that I meet in the industry. If I'm focused and concerned about my exercise, my fitness, my physical condition, I'm also going to be interested in my nutrition and how I look after that. Additional to the things I've said today, Incolink are also very involved in a part of the industry around suicide. The construction industry in Australia is overrepresented in suicide statistics and is one of the main industries for suicide fatalities in Australia. Because of that, Incolink has created a whole educational program around suicide awareness, around suicide prevention, and around how mental health and suicide dovetail together. What we've noticed with survivors of suicide attempts is that life after suicide can often feel chaotic and without direction. And that suicide survivors need some new sense of meaning and purpose in their lives. One of the first things that people who've survived a suicide attempt may like to do is to take control of their bodies, because that feels doable. Many people who survive a suicide attempt really take up an exercise program, getting fit, getting back in shape, eating well, because they feel like this is something that gives them a sense of direction and meaning. So for that reason, we also, as part of the Incolink counselling team, find this part of taking control, arresting your nutritional intake to be really, really valuable. Thanks, Glenn. That's all I've got on that topic.
Thanks, Dom. Thanks, Brendan. I was talking to your colleague Dom the other day, and I've just mixed you up. So, good. Always a good question. This one. We were talking bananas earlier.
Yes.
How well do you practice what you preach, my friend?
Good question. I'm an old bloke now, and I like to try and keep on top of my physical shape. I mentioned in the telecast that I'm a boxing coach in my spare time.
Good.
And to maintain my ability to coach others in boxing, I need to keep a level of fitness. So I'm pretty keen about keeping fit. And as part of that, I do really try and look after my nutritional intake and my food.
Yeah.
Not always easy. We have busy lives as counsellors too, and sometimes it's really easy to go and grab something quick that may not be as nutritional. And sometimes in the stresses of life, I love drinking coffee to keep alert, awake, and on top of things, and maybe my coffee intake's a bit high. But overall, I find that my exercise program and the fact that I'm training a lot and training others a lot keeps my nutritional content accountable, or keeps me accountable for it.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hearing in that is it's useful if you've got another motivator other than just to eat, because we all know we're supposed to eat healthy, right?
We do.
We know this. It's not like anyone's listening to this, and there's not a bloke watching this on his computer and going, "Oh right, oh yeah, I'm supposed to eat healthily. That would be good for my health. Thanks, Brendan. Now I've got that knowledge. That's all I needed." So, I mean, obviously knowledge is important, knowledge of kind of like, what is healthy and not healthy and what balance looks like. But we all know roughly this stuff, and we definitely know that we're supposed to eat healthily. So if we all already know this, then what is it that needs to change? Because it's not just about, not just about knowing, is it?
No, it's not just about knowing. And I think this pairing up of looking after our nutrition with exercise, with an exercise program, really is a dual motivator.
Yeah.
Because when I think about nutrition, sometimes I think, oh, that feels hard. But if I think about nutrition and think about looking better or feeling fitter, or living with more energy and vitality, that feels like a nice idea.
Yeah. So it's about finding the motivator for you, whatever that is, whether that's to live longer for your kids, or to just have a bit more energy to be with your kids, to be better in the bedroom, to help you meet an exercise goal, whatever the motivator is for you. If you can attach in your mind that sort of link between eating healthier, having good nutrition, and a personal value or goal, then I guess that's going to make it easier to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nutrition and relationships, like nutrition and exercise, also have a connection.
Right.
A lot of the guys that talk to us in the industry say, my wife, my partner, complains a lot because when I get home at night time and get the things done that I need to get done, we go to bed and lie down in bed together, and she wants to talk or have sex or whatever, and I put my head on the pillow and go, boom.
Right.
We're looking after our nutrition. I think we're going to have more energy. We're going to have a bit more up and aboutness to us, and that might help us to have better relationships or a bit more longevity in the day.
Yeah.
And a happier partner or wife.
Happy spouse, happy house.
Happy spouse, happy house.
Yeah. I don't know about you, and what that connection between nutrition and mental health is really clear from experience. And for me, it kind of, it does go in both directions. So it's if I'm getting through those packets of Tim Tams quicker, do you know, one of the, I'm going to share some quite personal here. So one of the lowest moments of my life, in terms of the low moments I'm prepared to share on a public forum, was because I actually don't smoke and I don't drink. Which is, it didn't used to be like that. But the one thing I still haven't cracked is my addiction to that beautiful combination of fat and sugar. And there's so many different ways that you can combine fat and sugar. And, you know, ice cream, chocolate, and those are the things like Tim Tams. My way of getting to know Australian culture has been to systematically eat my way through every single new flavor of Tim Tam. So that's not, doesn't work well for me, right? But I remember one of the lowest moments in my life was when I used to live above a kind of in a town above a garage that had like a little supermarket in there. And so I used to go down maybe at 10 o'clock at night sometimes, I'd just get a little bit of sweet something before I go to bed. And I've got this tub of ice cream one time, and I ate it all in one go. And then the next night, I went and bought, I liked it so much. The next night I thought, hey, last night went really well. I think I might have another go at that. And the guy behind the counter said, oh, already? Didn't you buy some of this yesterday? And it was like, oh no, the guy in the garage is policing my sugar and fat intake, and I'm now going to have to go to a garage 2 miles away to
buy some more.
My sugar and fat addiction going. But I guess the point I'm reaching towards is that in terms of the direction between nutrition and mental health, I'm joking, but that's a sign that I'm not traveling so well. If I'm doing that, there's something that I'm not dealing with, whether that's overwork or stress or relational issue or financial stress or whatever. And I find that when my mental health isn't so good, it shows up in poor nutrition.
Yeah, that creates that nearly like a loop, doesn't it? Because in your case, the eating the Tim Tams is your coping strategy in some way.
Yeah.
Like alcohol is for some people, or like other forms of drug taking is for other people.
Mm.
And then that creates this loop of I'm coping through eating junky food or alcohol or whatever it is, which is probably helping me to avoid the issue that's created in the first place, which is making me more stressed and anxious, which makes me probably eat more Tim Tams and probably avoid the issue.
Yeah, right.
And that becomes a sort of a downward spiral. So yeah, it's a good association to make, I think, and that it acts as an indicator that something's not right.
Yes. And then for me, the flip out sometimes can be to just simple things: drink more water, eat more fruit, certainly eat less sugar and fat. And that can be part of the process of kicking along with exercise for me, of kicking myself out of that downward spiral. And it's actually very common in blokes. I didn't realize this, but there was some amazing research done by the Black Dog Institute on ways that blokes were either depressed or suicidal, the things that they did to cope. Because there's a lot of focus on the things that blokes don't do or the unhealthy coping mechanisms. So they looked at, well, what are the strengths? What do blokes do to cope? And they asked something like, when you're not feeling on an even keel, what do you do to make yourself feel better? Kind of like something like that. And it threw up all sorts of things that you might not expect, like, you know, helping someone else, reframing my thoughts with humor. So there's humor in there. There was making a contribution to others, but eating healthily was actually one of the things that about 50% of blokes said was one of the mechanisms they have of actually making themselves feel better mentally. So a lot of us actually already instinctively know this connection that you're pointing to.
Yes, yeah. And I think often men have the capacity to have a better relationship with their body than they do with some of the people in their life. And if they can connect to that relationship with their body and look after their body in this particular way, they get this sense of accomplishment, fulfillment, and flourishing.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's been really interesting, Brendan. I'd actually really love to explore with you further about actually the healthy environments. One thing I'm thinking of is that, you know, every time I go to a servo early in the morning, I see the tradies lined up getting what has to be some of the worst possible breakfasts ever. But then when you look around those places, there is no healthy option. And I'm really interested in, you know, what more we can do to change the environment around men to improve eating habits, provide more healthy options to them that's cheap, that's accessible, that's tasty, and all the rest of it.
Yes.
But maybe that's a conversation for another time. Because
Glenn.
Great. So, Brendan, thanks for joining us. The line was a little bit dodgy there, but I think we've got the gold of what you're saying. Thanks for the great work that you and all the team at IncoLink are doing, taking health messages and health promotion work out to construction sites across Tasmania and Victoria. Hope you'll stick around and listen to what our other guests have got to say if you've got time. The first of which is friend and colleague, Professor Gary Wittert from the Freemasons Foundation Centre for Men's Health. Just to get a sense of how your microphone's working, Gary, just say good day, please.
Yeah, hi, Glenn. How are you going?
Yeah, really good. Coming through loud and clear. Brendan, I'm just going to ask you to mute yourself. So I've done that now. So, Gary, the floor's yours. What have you got for us on this topic of nutrition that Brendan's opened up for us?
Well, it's a subject I could probably fill a few hours with. So strap yourselves in and put your helmets on and off we go. I think, Brendan's raised some extremely interesting points. And I want to pick up on one of those, which is not, well, I would love to talk about nutrition and mental health, but what I'm going to talk about is something else that's really important to mental health and to relationships, and that's erectile function. And, it's something that many men are concerned about, being able to get adequate erections, particularly as they get older. And it's often blamed on getting older. And actually, there's no reason to have any significant diminution of erectile function with increasing age. It's a function of accumulation of a variety of health problems and perhaps a life less well led in terms of some of the behaviors around food and exercise and diet. So those people that stay lean and healthy and have a very good diet and exercise regularly and satisfying relationships will maintain excellent erectile function. And it's not only a reflection of accumulated disease, but it occurs often much earlier than many of the other manifestations of those disorders. So some research has shown that people who are having difficulties with their erections will many years later get a myocardial infarction or heart attack. So it's kind of like a beacon, if you'll excuse the pun, of a failing vascular system, and other parts of that system are equally affected, but will subsequently manifest themselves. So it's a warning that things are not right. Many years ago, we did a national survey. It was done with Andrology Australia, Now Healthy Male. And one of the papers that came out of that was the question we asked men about whether their general practitioners had asked them whether they had erectile dysfunction. And in very few cases had they been asked. And when we asked the question, did they want to be asked, by far the majority said they did want to be asked. So it's not a problem that men want to avoid. And actually, by the way, men don't avoid seeing their doctors. This is one of the greatest myths that ever existed. It's fundamentally false. Men are interested in their health. They're interested in their health care. They want to get better help. They do seek help. They just do it differently. And one of the things that general practitioners don't quite get is they wait for people to tell them the problem. Men wait to be asked. And so it's really hard to change general practitioners, but maybe, and I explained to many men that one of the things you can do is learn how to manage your GP better. And so, maybe go with a list of the things that you want to talk about. And in the meantime, we'll work really hard trying to train medical practitioners to do better. But anyway, back to the food issue. There are many ways that eating a healthy diet improves everything. And I want to just touch on this point about what is a healthy diet, because there is so much confusion out there. There's so much on the media, on television, in books, and everybody's got a different opinion. Actually, it's really, really simple. Look, we're blokes, and we're supposed to be really simple, and we can only think of binary concepts, this or that. And so the way I do this is to say, if you're going to put something on your plate, ask two questions. before this was on my plate, was it growing somewhere? And I don't mean in an intermediary sense, I mean in a direct sense. And the second question is, before this was on my plate, was it with its mother? Now, try not to think too hard about Skippy when you ask that question, but it's a serious point, because what that means, an answer to one of those questions at least has to be yes, is you're going to eat fresh whole foods. So fruit and vegetables, whole grains, meat, fish, chicken, dairy products, milk, yogurt, and so on. You're not going to eat processed foods. So what's been clearly shown, for example, in the Australian National Health Survey, that people who ate more fruit and vegetables were happier. Now, I don't think that they ate more fruit and vegetables because they were happy, but if you eat a better diet, it has an effect on your mood. You feel better. People who eat better diets are less likely to get depression, and people who have depression should be encouraged to eat better. People who, and there are bi-directional relationships here, they work two ways. I don't want to underestimate that. People, for example, who have sleep disorders, like they don't breathe at night when they sleep, the heavy snorers, be aware this is a problem. Or people on shift work who've got disruption of their normal day-night rhythms. It's much harder for people in those circumstances to control their food intake. There are changes in the brain that make them want to eat more processed and junk food. So none of these things exist in isolation. Everything has to be looked at in a very comprehensive and holistic way. And so it's really important to think about, if I can't implement this simple advice, what else is going on with me? Is there a mood disorder? Is there a sleep disorder? Have I got some other health problem? And then exercise, which again was being talked about, is absolutely critical to all of this. And a simple analogy, none one of us, well, I hope not one of us, would think of going out in the morning without brushing our teeth. And for most of us, you wouldn't go to bed at night without brushing your teeth. Why? Because it's part of your hygiene program. You want to maintain healthy gums. You want to prevent periodontal disease. You want to prevent cavities. And you want to be healthy and acceptable to other people socially as well. So why then would we think about going a single day without physical activity? Because effectively, it's the equivalent of toothbrushing for the rest of our body. It's the fix all for everything. It's the prevent all for everything. And we got to take it every day. One way I put this to people in the context of erectile function, once we got past the healthy eating bit, is try coming home from work or coming out of your study at the end of the day, now that we're in COVID lockdowns. Go and look at your wife in the eyes, or your partner. Take your partner by the hand and say, "Come, darling, let's go for a walk." Now, after your partner finally gets up the floor and regains consciousness, they'll agree to come for a walk with you. And something amazing happens when you go for a walk with your partner. They'll talk to you, and as long as you make the appropriate acknowledgements that you're listening, by the end of a few weeks of this, you'll get much, much fitter, and you'll find that their heart's grown fonder and your erection is longer and stronger. Couldn't give you a better message, because relationships are about doing things together, physical activity together. It's a good opportunity to get out and connect and also get fitter. And then think about, when the shopping is done, just the simple food rules. Are we buying fresh whole foods? Is it mostly plants? Are we avoiding processed meats? And are we drinking water? And the final point, and this is something that I don't want to get shot for delivering, but I'm going to deliver it anyway. There is no safe threshold for alcohol. None whatsoever. If we start to believe the myth that a little bit of alcohol is good for us, we're only fooling ourselves. No safe threshold. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have, because there are many things. I mean, I wouldn't tell people not to eat processed foods, ever. That would be absurd. It's something we'll do occasionally. But someone who has 2 drinks every night after dinner and says that's the safe threshold, not at all. Far from it. And not only is it bad for health in general, but it has a profoundly disruptive effect on sleep. So my message is, if you want to get good erectile function, connect with your partner, preferably while doing some exercise together. Eat a healthy diet, mostly fruits and vegetables, mostly plants, avoid processed foods, drink water, avoid alcohol, and if you've got underlying disorders, get them sorted out.
Gary, that's excellent. I can always rely on you to bring erections into the conversation no matter where we start it.
That's a standout point for me.
I get that. So you had me with fonder, longer and stronger, and I could hear in the distance the sound of blokes sort of rushing out to buy walking boots. And then you threw in the curveball, which was the no safe threshold. Now, I don't drink, so I'm okay with that. But you'll probably tell me there's also no safe threshold for Tim Tams either. So,
oh, look, it comes in the same category of yes, there's no safe threshold, but there's the sometimes foods. So if you feel you've got to have 2 Tim Tams before bed at night, well, then maybe you should take a careful look at some other aspects of your life. But if you occasionally went out with friends or to visit, or you had visitors and you had some Tim Tams, that's a different matter. Yeah. So I think it's not about what people choose to do sometimes. It's how things are done on a regular basis. Another common problem in relation to sleep disruption, I once spent a few weeks asking all my patients if they got up at night to look at their phone. Or if they did get up at night, did they look at their phone? Well, there are hardly any men who don't. It's very infrequent in women, but men seem to read their phones at night, either in bed or when they get up, and that's extremely disruptive to sleep. And then there's the getting up at night to eat problem. So that's another thing. So these are all small little things, but they all add cumulatively to this kind of thing. And for someone who's a shift worker, if they're not exercising, well, firstly, shift workers are at risk, enormously so, because you've got disruption to day-night rhythms. Now, the simple advice to shift workers, firstly, is exercise, because you'll mitigate the adverse effects. And that's an OC health and safety issue. The second is the quality of the diet, and that's an OC health and safety issue. You want to see what's on offer for the guys up at Roxby Downs. It's a disgrace in terms of nutrition. And these are the people who should be optimizing it. And then the advice about clamping the meals for a certain time, so that whether you're on or off a particular shift, you can still eat at roughly similar times. Now, they're all relatively simple things that science has now shown can mitigate those effects.
Excellent. Always good to get your evidence-based approach. I'm sorry to keep grasping on this point, but the bit about going for a walk with your missus gives you longer and stronger erections, is that evidence-based?
That is evidence-based, absolutely. Do you want to know whether an N=1 study is satisfactory, Glenn? Get your boots and try it. No, look, it's an anecdote, but the evidence for physical activity improving erectile function, absolutely solid. A study was done many, many years ago. There was no dietary intervention. It was purely exercise-based and had a remarkable effect. Does a better relationship with your partner improve sexual function? Absolutely it does. Marrying it together, is it seemingly likely that it will produce a benefit? Well, I've never done the study other than the N=1, but I bet it does.
Right. That's fantastic. And it's definitely one area of academia where you definitely want to lean on the solid research, isn't it?
You bet.
You bet. Gary,
well,
Professor Wittert, thanks for being here. You're free to go, but if you are able to stick around, you're also very, very welcome.
I'd be very, very, very happy to hear the other speakers. Thanks.
Wonderful. So we're going to go to Joel Feren, who's the nutrition guy. Now, Joel, in case you think you've come to the wrong conversation, we are talking about nutrition, to be absolutely clear. So you're joining Brendan O'Dowd from IncoLink, who does a lot of work in construction industry with traders and construction workers, and was talking about the links between mental health and nutrition. I think you've got a grasp of where Gary's coming from and going to, and now we're going to come to you to bring us home and share with us your expertise and thoughts around nutrition and men's health. Over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me on. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of crossover. Gary, I only caught half of your presentation, and while I'm not going to be talking about erections, I'm certainly going to be talking about good nutrition. But it's good to know that good nutrition and physical activity can certainly help in the bedroom as well. I've got a presentation. Look, I'm not too tech savvy. I've accepted my limitations in life, but I'm going to try and share my screen. Actually, I think, Glenn, you need to be able to do that for me.
No, yeah, just making you go now.
Okay. Here we go. Can you all see that? Fantastic. So look, I know that I've only got 15 minutes, so it's really going to be scratching the surface, but hopefully it's going to echo what some of the other speakers have already talked about and just sort of solidify some of the health messages that I want to particularly get across. Perfect. So look, I don't expect you to get your magnifying glass out to read this, but this is really just a snapshot of men's health in Australia. 31% of us, almost 1/3 of us, have a chronic health condition. Conditions with the highest burden of disease in men include ischemic heart disease, type 2 diabetes, lung cancer, trachea cancer, and I'll also put colorectal cancer in there, which is the 3rd leading cause of men in Australia. And one stat I find particularly interesting and I guess staggering at the same time is that 2/3 of us are overweight and obese. So there's certainly an opportunity for us to improve our nutritional health, but also our physical health to hopefully reduce that high number. Look, exercise isn't my area of expertise, but I think, just taking that holistic approach to health, it's important just to touch on it. I know, obviously, it's just been mentioned. Unfortunately, only half of us are exercising enough. So ideally, we want more than 150 minutes of exercise over the week, ideally half an hour each day of the week. Exercise rates were highest amongst younger men in the age group 25 to 34. Unfortunately, I just fall outside that age range. But like it was just mentioned, I mean, I talk about non-negotiables. And I think it's fascinating that, we brush our teeth twice a day, we wash our hair X times a week. But exercise isn't necessarily seen as a non-negotiable. It's certainly something that I've included in my routine, and obviously with the onset of COVID, my exercise regime has changed significantly, but I certainly do make that time to exercise. Try to get in a walk every day. I'm a new dad. I've got an 8-month-old. So love walking with my young daughter, and also try to do a bit of a strength routine at home as well. And I guess worryingly, we know the benefits of exercise, particularly for an older population. So I think my internet, there we go, I'm back up. Well, we know the benefits of exercise for an older population, in particular with regards to bone health, but also ensuring that we keep the meat on our bones as we age. And unfortunately, only 25% of men over the age of 65 were doing enough activity. So increasing our exercise levels can help slash our risk of heart disease, can improve our blood pressure, better manage our blood sugar control, reduce our risk factors for certain cancers, increase our mood and reduce risk factors for mental health issues, improve bone health, obviously help with weight management, and also help with reducing risk factors for dementia and Alzheimer's disease. I don't actually consult with clients these days. My work's taking me in different directions, but when I talked about exercise, I would always try to frame it in a way that it wasn't necessarily a means to lose weight. I think we need to take a holistic approach to something like exercise and realize that there are so many benefits to doing exercise, and it really shouldn't just be a strategy to lose weight. So I think keeping these other things in mind will hopefully encourage and drive you to being a little bit more active. So I posed the question, what are we eating? But perhaps it should be framed slightly differently, and what aren't we eating? Unfortunately, we're probably not like the guy in the top left corner. We're probably more like the guy in the bottom right-hand corner there, eating burgers with processed meat. But perhaps we just need to get the balance right. With regards to fruit and vegetables, look, both genders actually drop the ball when it comes to fruit and veg intake. Only 1 in 20 Australian men eat enough fruit and vegetables. I find this stat absolutely staggering. I mean, maybe I practice what I preach, and maybe I think too much like a dietitian, but I'm able to knock off my fruit intake, fruit requirements first thing in the morning, a couple of serves of fruit in my breakfast cereal, and definitely try to prioritize my vegetable intake over the day. We know that eating fresh fruits and vegetables is a cornerstone of good health. I don't need to bang on about the benefits, but we certainly know that there's decreased incidence of heart disease, stroke, and definitely improvement seen in blood pressure. And unfortunately, the statistics show that more men have incidence of blood pressure compared to women. So ideally, we need to be aiming for the 2 and 5. So a serve of fruit is what fits in the palm of your hand. So that could be a medium apple, could be half a large banana, it could be a couple of mandarins. And a serve of vegetables, I think this is quite misunderstood, but it's half a cup of cooked vegetables or 1 cup of salad vegetables. So ideally we should be covering our plate, half of our plate, with non-starchy, colourful vegetables, in particular both at lunch and dinner. We know that we should be including more whole grains and legumes in our diet. These are incredibly healthy for us. Generally, the recommendations are, depending on level of activity, that we get about 4 to 6 serves of grain foods over the day. And generally speaking, we're meeting those requirements. However, mostly we're choosing the refined grains. So refined grains are things like white breads, white rice, even pasta, white pasta to some extent, even though I sort of consider that quite a healthy option. The refining process actually strips away a lot of that nutrition from the whole grain. So if we can swap out some of those refined grains and include more of those whole grains, we'll certainly be doing ourselves a favour from a gut health perspective, from a mood perspective, and also to help improve our heart health. And interestingly enough, it's not only Men's Health Week, it's also Whole Grain Week. So a wonderful opportunity to celebrate those whole grains and include more of them in our diet. Now, I'm a big lover of legumes, and I really think they're underutilised in the Australian diet. Only about 1/4 of us are eating enough legumes. So legumes consist of lentils, beans, chickpeas, whole variety of those different types of foods. Baked beans, Shane Warne's old favourite. We can definitely be doing better with our legume intake. 1 serve is half a cup, and ideally we should be including 3 serves over the week. I guess it's slightly heartening that there are more of us eating legumes compared to back in 2014, but I certainly think that we can improve our efforts with regards to legume intake. Now, salt. I don't know if some of you are familiar with the Eat Lancet report that was released last year, but it was suggested that a high salt intake was the leading dietary risk factor for deaths globally. And unfortunately, Australian men are eating twice as much salt as they should be each day. We know that high salt diets can predispose us to heart disease and increase blood pressure, increase our risk of stroke as well. And salt generally is found in processed foods. So actually a very small amount of the salt that we eat each day is from the salt that we add during cooking or at the table. So if we can minimise or reduce our intake of some of these processed packaged foods, it'll actually go a long way to help reduce our overall salt intake. So how do we improve our overall health with nutrition? And I certainly want to take a holistic approach to diet. It's not really about one specific food or even one specific nutrient. I'm a big subscriber to the Mediterranean diet. There's so much evidence to show that it is probably one of the leading diets, and it can help reduce our risk factors for so many different things, heart disease, improve our mood, even improve our sleep quality as well. So when I talk about the Mediterranean diet, I think the key features include extra virgin olive oil as the predominant fat source, nuts, seeds, whole grains, legumes, oily fish. And there's certainly a reduced reliance on things like dairy and meats. And wine can be included in moderation. I think a lot of the research pertaining to Mediterranean diets is sort of looking at the dietary pattern on the whole. It's not necessarily that wine is the leading factor in helping to reduce some of those risk factors. I think we need to look at the broader context, but certainly wine in small amounts can be included. And we know generally that anti-inflammatory foods are going to be beneficial for our health overall. So when I talk about anti-inflammatory foods, it's really about whole foods and making sure that we're getting enough of those in our diet. So including the foods from the various 5 core food groups. So whole grains, lean proteins, fruits, vegetables, as well as dairy. Now the World Cancer Research Fund have a number of guidelines on how to manage our lifestyle and diet. So some of the recommendations are to include or to maintain at least a healthy weight, making sure that we're active each day, so aiming for that 30 minutes, avoiding sweet drinks, limit energy dense food. And I think, my thoughts echo the previous speaker. And we don't necessarily need to eliminate these foods from our diet, but certainly, reduce our intake of these foods. And I subscribe to the everyday, sometimes food philosophy as well. So fruits, vegetables, these are core foods we should be including every day. And then things like sweet drinks and Tim Tams, perhaps, maybe these are the sometimes foods that we could be eating once a week, once a fortnight. Already banged on enough about fruit, veggies, whole grains, legumes. I think Australians can certainly limit their red meat intake over the week. Recommendations are for about 2 to 3 serves a week. We can certainly reduce our alcohol intake as well. And like I've just mentioned, definitely reduce our salt consumption. Looking to improve our sleep quality. Interestingly enough, the Predimed study, which was a study that was fundamentally looking at the link between heart disease and the Mediterranean diet, actually showed that the adoption of Mediterranean diet can improve our sleep quality. So I think that's another big tick for the Mediterranean diet. One of the recommendations was exercise, particularly aerobic activities, so making sure that you're a little bit puffy, out of breath when you do movement. However, I subscribe to the philosophy that any movement is going to be positive, and it's really about moving your body in a positive way. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go run a marathon or cycle 100 Ks. Perhaps it could be less intense, a bout of yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi. I think anything is really going to be positive. With regards to nutrition, a diet that mirrors something like the Australian Dietary Guidelines or even the Mediterranean diet. And while not necessarily nutrition related, there's some benefit in spirituality, finding meaning and having purpose in our lives, and certainly having that social support and ensuring that connectedness as well. Now, food and mood, I could probably talk for a whole hour on the link between food and mood, and I find this absolutely fascinating, and it's certainly an emerging area of research. If you are interested in exploring a little bit more detail about this link, a lot of the research is actually being done here in Melbourne. So you can have a look at the Food and Mood Centre run by Felice Jacker at Deakin Uni. Some of the research is actually showing that we're now finding a conclusive link between our diet quality and our mood. And a large intake of high sugar and processed foods have been linked with depressive symptoms. And links have been found as well between depression and anxiety with an out-of-kilter microbiota. So the microbiota relates to the bacteria that live inside our large intestine. If you're interested in numbers, there are over 37 trillion bacteria that live inside us. And it's really about ensuring that we've got a varied diet that can actually hold the key to improving the diversity of gut bacteria. And one of the recommendations to improving that diversity is to include 30 different plant foods over the week. Statistically, Australians are pretty good at limiting the variety of foods in their diet, and we tend to include about 18 to 20 different foods over the week. But if we can include more of that variety, we're only going to maximize the nutrients that we consume. So look to include a variety of different colored fruits, vegetables, different whole grains, a variety of legumes, nuts, seeds as well. Some of the evidence has actually shown that if we swap those refined carbs and packaged foods for more whole grains, increased variety of vegetables as well as fish for a period of about 12 weeks, we can actually reduce the severity of depression. And I guess more than that, human brains require antioxidants to help with cell function, protect against oxidative stress, and decrease low-level inflammation. And we know that antioxidants are typically found in those plant-based foods. So these are the foods that we need to be consuming more of. And generally, I try not to talk about junk foods. I subscribe to the sometimes food philosophy. But if we can reduce those types of foods in our diet, will inherently increase the nutrient-dense foods that we're consuming. And these types of foods can help to reduce that low-level inflammation that it's often associated with things like dementia and even type 2 diabetes. And very mindful of time, but I just wanted to focus on a couple of different foods. I know there's a lot of conjecture around soy, and I think soy is actually a superfood for men's health. A lot of the conjecture pertaining to soy relates around isoflavones and the fact that they mimic the behavior of estrogen in the body, but they're almost like a weak form of estrogen, and there's no evidence to show that it can increase estrogen production in men or even decrease testosterone levels in blokes. In fact, soy intake has been shown to reduce prostate cancer risk. And from an epidemiological perspective, prostate cancer risk is actually quite low in Asian cultures where there's a high intake of soy-based foods. Soy protein has also been shown to reduce our nasty level of cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol. So if you do want to include soy in your diet, and I certainly encourage you to, aim for about 2 to 3 serves a day. Now, extra virgin olive oil is probably one of my favourite foods, and it's a superfood for everyone. We know that there's actually some evidence to show that we should be increasing our intake of extra virgin olive oil. Long gone are the days of talking about low-fat diets. There's certainly merit in including more of these heart-healthy fats, the nuts, seeds, avocados, and of course, extra virgin olive oil. Nutritionally, extra virgin olive oil is another superfood containing those monounsaturated fats. Number of antioxidants, including polyphenols, phytosterols, as well as vitamin E. And from perhaps a urological perspective, vitamin E can actually help with sperm motility and increase our fertility as well. Increased amounts of extra virgin olive oil have been shown to improve insulin sensitivity as well. And there's low rates of prostate cancer that have been seen in some Mediterranean countries that do have a high intake of extra virgin olive oil. And very quickly, I hate these types of lists, the top foods for men, but if you'll indulge me for one moment, I'll just run through these just to finish off. Walnuts. Walnuts contain plant-based omega-3, been shown to improve our heart health, reduce inflammation in the body. Oysters are a fabulous source of zinc, and there's I think a bit of a story about Casanova, who used to eat 50 oysters for breakfast. Now I can think of a number of foods that I would choose to eat at breakfast before 50 oysters. But certainly if you want to include more zinc in your diet, oysters are a fantastic source. Zinc helps with testosterone. It can also help support a healthy immune system. Tomatoes are an important source of lycopene, and lycopene is an antioxidant that has been shown to reduce incidence of prostate cancer. Turkey contains an amino acid called tryptophan, which is the precursor for serotonin, which is the happy hormone in the brain. Salmon is a wonderful food, and it contains the marine source of omega-3s. Like I said earlier, it helps with reducing inflammation, improving heart health, as well as brain function as well. Eggs are another superfood containing about 10 or 11 different nutrients. Like milk, milk contains bone building calcium and phosphorus, protein, vitamin A, vitamin B12, whole grains, like I've talked about earlier, and baked beans. You're actually getting both the benefits of the legume, but also the lycopene if you include it in the tomato sauce. But I guess the caveat with these types of lists is that we've got to take a holistic approach and obviously got to look at the broader picture. It's all good and well including one or two of these types of foods in our diet regularly, but we need to consider the dietary pattern overall. So ensuring that we're getting enough fruit, vegetables over the day, including whole grains, perhaps reducing our intake of red meat, but focusing more on that quality, the diversity of our diet, and certainly including more of those plant-based foods, I think is definitely going to hold us in better stead. Hope I haven't gone over time, but very quickly, I've just shared my my contact details. If you'd like to get in touch or connect with me on social media, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much.
We'll share those links underneath wherever this video appears as well. Thanks, Joel. I wanted to hang on there because we haven't got a 1 o'clock show, but I'm sure many of us have got a date with some baked beans and some oysters and some other plant-based foods. Anything you want to just say or ask before we go? Because I'm not in a rush for a couple of minutes if you guys got you all together. In fact, I might change and put us all on screen together like that. Brendan, you've sat there for like half an hour listening to these guys. Anything you want to say in conclusion in response to Gary and Joel's presentations?
Yeah, thanks very much, Glenn. I really like both Gary and Joel's points about motivation. What's motivating us? We settle into being a certain way in life, and sometimes it feels difficult to change. So having motivators is important, and I think Gary's point there about being longer and stronger is a very good motivation for men. We want to be able to have sex with our partners, and there's a deep sense of shame if we can't get an erection. Nutrition helps us to get erections, and that's a good motivator. Joel, I was particularly interested in your point about legumes and how culturally legumes aren't something we eat enough of. I've got friends who are Lebanese, and I see them weekly and eat with them weekly, and they eat so many legumes. They have lentil stews and lentil soups and hummus, chickpeas coming out their ears. It's easy for them to get this kind of food in their diet, and yet I feel for Australian men, it's not so easy. Curious about how we can incorporate that a little bit more into our life.
We need to make hummus an integral part of the Aussie Barbie somehow. It works for me. I'm a vegetarian.
Absolutely. Sorry to talk over the top of you, Glenn, but I've got a fabulous recipe on my website for hummus. So if you'd like to check that out, please feel free to do so. And I've got some other plant-based recipes on there too. But yes, totally agree with you, Brendan. If we can include more legumes, more of those lentil bologneses, lentil stews, dal in our diet, it'll definitely go some way to help better manage our health overall, our weight, but reduce some of those risk factors for chronic disease.
Yeah, Great. And Gary, some final thoughts for you, Professor
Yeah,
Wittert.
I just want to comment on the bread issue. I mean, the two biggest toxins in the Australian diet, or certainly the South Australian diet, is a certain brand of iced coffee, yeah, which the people I see buying it are the people you particularly don't want to be drinking it. It's a toxin. For hydration, we should be drinking water. And fruit juice is not for hydration. Fruit is for eating, not for juicing. And those people that use these magic bullets and whatever they are to smash their food into smoothies and think that it's health, no, it's not. That leads to very abnormal profiles of blood sugar with big spikes because of the way the stomach empties. And we should eat food and drink water. That's the one thing I wanted to say. The second toxin in our diet is bread. Bread is a staple for the starving. We're not a nation of starving people. Most people have got enough energy stored to burn a small city for a month, me included. Even whole grain bread. I go to the supermarket and they've got these fancy wraps, which they tell me are barley, better for you. When you read the label, when you finally find it in the small bottom corner, it's 5% barley and 95% of everything else, mostly salt, by the way. So the biggest source of salt in the diet for most people, apart from the other processed foods, is bread. And there's very few nutrients in bread. It's mostly sugar. The whole grains that are in it, it's a bit like chicken sprint soup. You boil the water and the chicken sprints through it. You know, they take the bread and some whole grains sprint through it. And if you get caught up, and the rest, you just don't need bread on a regular basis unless you're an athlete or you have some other needs for very high energy consumption. Rather spend the time and energy eating fruit and vegetables and proper food.
Yeah, Gary, when
I'm so sorry, Gary. I'm going to have to disagree with you there. I think if we look at particularly whole grain breads, they're a wonderful source of key nutrients, including B vitamins, folate, potassium, as well as dietary fiber. And from an energy perspective, it's actually quite low in energy. Yes, salt is added, and that's, you know, generally due to the process of making bread. I don't think we need to be eating half a loaf or a loaf a day, but certainly 2 to 3 slices a day is perfectly acceptable. What I'd encourage people to do is choose a whole grain option.
Well, we can disagree on that because I see the end results of people and I see the consequences of what happens when they reduce bread from their diet, their blood pressure, their blood sugars, and their weight. So I think another way to think about it is if you got to put fuel in your car, you can make a choice. Your tank is only so big. If you put too much in, the tank spills over if you leave the cap off. But if you have to put premium 98 in, and you decide that premium 98 is too expensive, you'll dilute it with ethanol, your car's not going to go so well. So if you need a certain amount of energy in a day, and for many people, they live at their basal metabolic rates, so if you need a certain amount of energy a day, think about how you're diluting it. And I think that is a very good concept for people to get their head around when making choices about their nutrition.
So we'll stop there. You carry on the discussion in the chat by all means. It's been great to break metaphorical bread with you three blokes. We've gone 10 minutes over time, but it was worth it. We'll agree to disagree on the bread issue, but I think there's lots in this conversation that you can take away. Just don't have so many takeaways is one of them. Thanks once more to Brendan O'Dowd from IncoLink, Joel Feren, the nutrition guy, and Professor Gary Wittert. This has been the Blokes Healthy Lunchbox. I'm Glenn Poole of the Australian Men's Health Forum. You're watching Men's Health TV. We'll be back at 2 p.m. with Blokes on the Couch, and we'll also be back tomorrow at 12 noon with a final episode of Blokes Healthy Lunchbox for Men's Health Week, where we're focusing on men's mental health. Come back at 2 p.m. Keep spreading the word, like this channel, share it on Facebook, and pass these great conversations on to your friends. Goodbye.